This is a discussion on automated external defibrillator for use by lay rescuer in CPR. Since early defibrillation is the third and one of the vital links in the chain of survival after sudden cardiac arrest due to ventricular fibrillation, automated external defibrillator for use in public places by lay rescuers have been devised. The rescuer turns on the device and attaches the adhesive electrodes on the chest of the victim. AED is a computerized device which can analyze the victim's cardiac rhythm and deliver a shock if the rhythm is ventricular fibrillation or ventricular tachycardia. The AED gives audible and visible prompts to guide the lay rescuer. The computer algorithm of an AED will advise the rescuer whether a shock is needed. The diagnostic algorithms of AEDs have been shown to be quite accurate in assessing and delivering an appropriate shock when needed. In one of the early studies, AED was used by paramedics to detect ventricular fibrillation and deliver shocks in 39 patients with out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. The AED identified and delivered at least one shock in 13 of the 16 patients with ventricular fibrillation, providing 81% sensitivity. Response of the AED was correct in all 21 non-ventricular fibrillation rhythms, which included 13 asystole, and no shocks were delivered. The device did not cause any injury to patients or personnel. Rhythm could not be assessed in 2 patients. Newer AEDs can also provide recorded information on the frequency and depth of chest compressions during CPR, and this could improve performance of bystander CPR. Use and development of public access defibrillation programs have been promoted by the American Heart Association since 1995 in order to improve survival in out-of-hospital sudden cardiac arrest. The goal of public access defibrillation programs is to shorten the time from onset of VF until CPR and shock delivery. High survival rates of the order of 40 to 70% have been obtained in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest when defibrillation occurs within 3 to 5 minutes of witnessed VF sudden cardiac arrest with immediate bystander CPR. Such high survival rates cannot be expected when the time of defibrillation is longer. For the success of a community lay rescuer AED program, the following aspects need to be taken care of: a planned and practiced response, training of potential rescuers in CPR and AED use, good link with local emergency medical service, and finally an ongoing quality improvement program. It may be noted that AEDs are not useful for non-shockable rhythms. Since non-perfusing rhythms may be present in most patients after a shock, the need for ongoing CPR is highlighted. A study from Italy assessed community-based AED-only resuscitation for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest patients. The rescuers attached the publicly available AEDs, turned it on and followed the instructions. They did not do CPR of any sort. It was a prospective study from 2001 to 2014 and was known locally as Progetto Vita. Google translates Progetto Vita as Life Project. Progetto Vita treated had 41.4% survival to hospital discharge among the 95 patients compared to 5.9% of the 3,271 patients treated by emergency medical services. At 13-year follow-up, estimates of survival was 31.8% when AED only was used and 2.4% with standard EMS CPR response. When the 95 EMS patients with fastest response times were compared, Progetto Vita was associated with a more than twofold increase in rate of survival. Discussion on the difference between monophasic and biphasic defibrillators. Defibrillator is a device used to shock the heart back into action when it stops contracting due to a disorder of rhythm known as ventricular fibrillation. The electrodes used to deliver the shock could be either defibrillator paddles or patches applied directly to the chest, below the left collarbone and at the apex of the heart. The direct current shock given can have a monophasic or biphasic waveform. In monophasic shock, the shock is given in only one direction from one electrode to the other. In a biphasic shock, initial direction of shock is reversed by changing the polarity of the electrodes in the latter part of the shock. Usually, the initial voltage applied is higher than the reverse polarity shock. Biphasic waveforms were initially developed for use in implantable cardioverter defibrillators and later adapted to external defibrillators. Biphasic truncated exponential waveform and rectilinear biphasic waveform are two types of biphasic waveforms used by different manufacturers. Defibrillators can sense the thoracic impedance and increase or decrease their internal resistance so that the selected level of energy is delivered to the subject. Biphasic shocks are more effective than monophasic shocks and need lesser energy. Typically, when 360 joules are delivered for defibrillation in a monophasic defibrillator, 200 joules are given in a biphasic defibrillator. This could theoretically reduce the potential damage to the heart muscle by the high voltage shock. The proposed mechanism is that a single monophasic wave of energy is not able to depolarize all the myocardial cells. Some cells close to the electrode gets too much energy while those away from the electrode gets too little. Reversing the polarity helps to sweep off these cells as well. This response is sometimes called a burping response of a biphasic waveform. A prospective randomized evaluation compared monophasic and biphasic waveforms in 22 survivors of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest during implantation of a cardioverter defibrillator. Of the patients, 15, that is 68%, had lower defibrillation threshold with biphasic pulse. The lower energy delivered in biphasic defibrillation could theoretically reduce the potential damage to the heart muscle by the high voltage shock. This aspect was evaluated by Tang and associates. They showed that biphasic waveform defibrillation at 150 joules was as effective as conventional monophasic defibrillation with damped sinus wave for restoration of spontaneous circulation. The energy delivered was significantly lower with biphasic defibrillation and was associated with significantly lower severity of post-resuscitation myocardial dysfunction. But a Cochrane systematic review could not confirm that biphasic defibrillators have an important effect on the success of defibrillation in persons with out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. Discussion on cardiac pacemakers. X-ray chest PA view showing a single chamber pacemaker with lead and an aortic prosthetic valve. The pulse generator of the pacemaker can be seen below the side marker. The pacemaker lead can be seen starting from the pacemaker header where it has been screwed in. A redundant part of the lead has been coiled within the pulse generator pocket subcutaneously, as is the usual practice during pacemaker implantation. The lead can be seen coursing through the subclavian vein into the superior vena cava and to the right atrium. Distal end of the pacemaker lead can be seen to the right of the spine near the left hemidiaphragm. The fact that the lead has crossed the midline in a PA view indicates that it has crossed the tricuspid valve, which usually overlies the spine in this view. Permanent right ventricular pacing leads are often placed at the right ventricular apex, which is technically easier. Several implanters now consider a position in the right ventricular outflow tract as more physiological. While pacing the right ventricular outflow tract, a screw-in lead is needed to retain the position. Special lead stylets are available to negotiate the lead tip to the right ventricular outflow tract. Position in RVOT should be posteriorly in the septal aspect, avoiding the free wall of RVOT to achieve the objective of early entry of signal into the conduction system. Early entry of signal into the conduction system will reduce dyssynchrony, which has been considered as a downside of right ventricular apical pacing. Close scrutiny of the pacemaker lead tip can identify two electrodes, one at the tip and one a little proximal to that. It needs a higher resolution photograph with more penetration or ideally a fluoroscopic imaging to bring out the details of the lead tip well. This X-ray also shows a Starr-Edwards aortic mechanical prosthetic valve and sternal suture wires. The aortic position of the valve can be identified by the upward direction of the cage. In Starr-Edwards aortic processes, the cage is seen upwards with 3 struts and the sewing ring at the base. This contrasts with the mitral processes, which has 4 struts for the cage and the cage is directed downwards towards the left ventricular apex. A prominent aortic knuckle and a bulge of the right atrial contour are other findings on this chest X-ray. Cardiac pacemaker is a device meant to give regular electrical pulses to the heart when the normal pacemaker function of the heart is defective. It is also used when the pulse conduction to the ventricles is blocked, as in complete heart block. The basic electronic pacemaker consists of an electronic circuitry to generate the pulses, a battery with long storage life of several years, and leads to convey pulses to the heart. Battery and circuitry are housed together in a hermetically sealed metallic container made of biocompatible material which will not induce a foreign body reaction in the body. This part, known as the pulse generator, is usually implanted beneath the skin under local anesthesia. Modern pacemakers have highly complex circuitry capable of monitoring the body's requirement and varying the pulse rate accordingly. They are also communicating devices which can transmit the stored information to a device known as programmer kept over the surface of the skin. Programmer can interrogate the pacemaker to retrieve important information regarding pacemaker function and malfunction. Latest programmers can send the data to a server over the internet, making it feasible for the specialized physician to evaluate complex pacemaker function sitting in another country or continent. The pacemaker lead is a passive component which transmits the pulses to the heart and receives the heart signals for the pacemaker to analyze. The current day demand pacemakers will sense the heart's intrinsic activity and give pulses only when they are not present. There are pacemakers available which can pace 1, 2 or 3 chambers of the heart. They are known as single chamber, dual chamber and biventricular pacemakers respectively. X-ray chest PA view demonstrating dual chamber pacemaker with leads in situ. Tip of the atrial lead is seen in the right atrial appendage location. It is a J-shaped lead which is preformed to reach the right atrial appendage. The ventricular lead tip is seen in the region of the right ventricular apex and appears to be a screw-in lead. The dual chamber pacemaker pulse generator is seen in the left infraclavicular region. The leads are seen traversing the left subclavian into the left brachiocephalic vein to the superior vena cava and then to the right atrium and right ventricle. Dual chamber pacemakers are able to provide multiple modalities of pacing. The atrial lead senses the atrial electrogram if present and triggers the ventricular channel after the programmed atrioventricular delay. This ensures atrial health for ventricular filling and improves cardiac output. Electronic circuitry of the pacemaker can interact with electromagnetic radiation. Keep away from sources of heavy electromagnetic radiation like a powerful radio transmitter. Most other day-to-day devices can be used with certain precautions. Theft detection devices can also cause electromagnetic interference. Mobile phones can be used at a distance. The usual recommendation is to keep it on the opposite ear depending on which side the device has been implanted. Those with implanted devices are given an identification card which can be shown at airport and other similar locations where electromagnetic devices are likely to be used for security check. MRI in pacemaker patients was generally regarded as contraindicated till recently because of potential interactions between the electromagnetic field and the device. Important aspects to be considered are as follows. 1. Local tissue heating. Device leads pick up energy and transfers it to the cells, causing rise of temperature. 2. Arrhythmia induction. Abnormal heart rhythms can originate due to the interference of device function. 3. Malfunction of device software and hardware due to interference by the magnetic field. 4. Artifacts due to the presence of the device in the image, decreasing the diagnostic accuracy of magnetic resonance imaging. Newer MRI conditional devices enable better imaging on following certain preset criteria and precautions. MRI is undertaken in pacemaker patients only if the estimated benefit far exceeds the potential risks and equivalent information is not obtainable by other imaging modalities like ultrasound or computer tomography. Discussion on temporary cardiac pacing. Temporary pacing is a life-saving procedure for maintaining the heart rate when it falls markedly, producing features of cerebral hypoperfusion. It can also be done prophylactically during certain procedures when there is a possibility of sudden fall in heart rate. Other reasons for temporary pacing are pacing to overdrive a tachycardia like ventricular tachycardia and pacing at fast rate to stabilize an aortic valvuloplasty balloon during balloon valvuloplasty. Temporary pacing is done prior to permanent pacing to give a good bradycardia support during the procedure. This fluoro shot is that of a temporary transvenous pacing through the femoral vein. The pacing lead is introduced through percutaneous puncture of the femoral vein in the groin. Lead is introduced under fluoroscopic guidance through the inferior vena cava and right atrium into the right ventricular apex. Pacing threshold is checked using the pacing system analyzer or a temporary pacemaker and the output kept 2 to 3 times above the threshold to ensure regular pacing. Externally, the pacing lead is fixed to the skin to reduce the chance of migration. Temporary transvenous pacing can also be done from the jugular, transjugular pacing, or subclavian routes by percutaneous puncture. Pacing maneuvers are an integral part of an electrophysiology study. In this case, pacing is done from various locations, unlike the usual right ventricular pacing for bradycardia support. Proximal connectors of a pacing lead are shown in this image. Tip of the bipolar temporary pacing electrode has a distal tip electrode and a proximal ring electrode. It is customary to give negative polarity to the tip and positive polarity to the ring electrode, as cathodal pacing has a lower threshold. Threshold is the minimum voltage needed for capturing the chamber paced. Here the tip has a golden color and proximal ring electrode has a silver color. But this is not a universal color code. Some temporary pacing electrodes have same color for both electrodes. Transvenous pacing can also be done at the bedside using balloon-tipped flow-directed catheters introduced by a subclavian puncture. Electrocardiographic monitoring from the tip of the pacing lead can guide us on the chamber in which the lead tip is positioned in the absence of fluoroscopy at bedside. While the tip is in the right atrium, large atrial deflections are recorded, and the pattern changes to an intracardiac ventricular electrogram when the lead tip reaches the right ventricle. Pacing through coronary artery is done as an emergency measure when a patient develops severe bradycardia during a coronary intervention procedure if a temporary transvenous catheter is not already in place. The proximal end of the coronary guide wire can be connected to the temporary pacemaker using a crocodile clip. A needle stuck into the skin can serve as the second electrode. This saves time needed for achieving an urgent femoral venous puncture and sometimes the potential bleeding risk of such punctures in a person who is fully anticoagulated for the coronary intervention. Pacing in an emergency situation can be obtained in the intensive care unit using external pacers which pace through large adhesive electrode patches applied to the chest wall. The disadvantages of transcutaneous pacing are the large current needed and consequent pain due to skeletal muscle stimulation, as well as the often unreliable ventricular capture. At the most, it can be used in standby mode to buy time for arranging a transvenous pacing. ECG shows a pace rhythm at around 60 per minute with pacing spikes preceding each QRS complex. At first look, it may seem that there is P wave before each QRS with a reasonable PR interval suggesting atrial sensed ventricular pacing, A sense, V pace, sequence or tracking. But close scrutiny shows that PR interval is gradually varying. The atrial rate is also close to 60 per minute, making false appearance of an AV synchronous pacing in some beats. In analog ECGs, the pacing spikes in temporary pacing are usually small as the pacing is bipolar with both electrodes within the ventricle. In digital ECGs, such small spikes are usually wiped out by the filter settings and the ECG appears like a left bundle branch block pattern. But switching on the pacing detection algorithm in digital electrocardiographs enhances the pacing spike detection, and sometimes the spikes are prominent even with temporary bipolar pacing, as in this case. Otherwise, a large spike indicates unipolar pacing between pacemaker can and lead tip electrode, which can occur only in a permanent pacemaker. The temporary pacemaker cover is non-conducting and situated outside the body without electrical contact. The QRS pattern mimics LBBB pattern with left axis deviation, as is usual with right ventricular apical pacing. If the lead tip slips and paces the right ventricular outflow region, it will give an LBBB pattern with inferior axis. Right bundle branch block pattern, if it occurs in the setting of temporary pacing, may indicate lead tip perforating either the interventricular septum and pacing the left ventricle endocardially, or the right ventricular free wall and pacing the left ventricular epicardium through the pericardial cavity. Here the interval between the pacing spike and the QRS complex is very short, so that there is good conduction at the lead endocardium interface. If that interval is prolonged, it would indicate a first degree exit block at the lead endocardium interface, pacemaker ventricular block. If the block is severe, it can lead to intermittent pacing, second degree pacemaker ventricular block, or loss of capture, exit block. Discussion on right ventricular pace rhythm with retrograde P waves. ECG shows wide QRS rhythm with LBBB pattern in lead 1, AVL and V1. Axis is leftward and V6 shows negative QRS complexes indicating pacing from right ventricular apex. Pacemaker artifacts or spikes can be seen on close scrutiny in V4 to V6 just before the onset of the wide QRS complex. Andrograde P waves are dissociated from the QRS complexes. Hence, the basic rhythm was complete heart block, which needed a pacemaker. Retrograde P waves marked as P prime are seen after the paced QRS complex in lead 2 rhythm strip with a reasonable retrograde conduction time. This is an interesting situation in that andrograde complete heart block coexists in the presence of fairly intact retrograde ventriculoatrial conduction. Here the retrograde P waves are negative in inferior leads, suggesting retrograde activation of the atrium. Negative P waves in V6 due to retrograde conduction during right ventricular pacing has been reported by Venkatraman K. Though usually negative P waves in V6 signifies activation starting from left atrium, that is left atrial rhythm. In single chamber pacemakers, retrograde P waves can cause reverse atrial kick as the atrial contraction occurs during ventricular systole, leading to regular cannon waves. But in dual chamber pacemaker, retrograde conduction can lead on to pacemaker mediated tachycardia. Pacemaker mediated tachycardia can be prevented by programming the post-ventricular atrial refractory period or PVARP beyond the time of occurrence of the retrograde P wave. Pacemaker mediated tachycardia or endless loop tachycardia occurs because the retrograde P wave is detected by the atrial circuit of the pacemaker and triggers a ventricular pacing after the programmed AV delay. This ventricular pace beat can again be conducted back into the atrium forming a circus phenomenon. Programming P-warp makes the atrial circuit refractory when the retrograde P-wave arrives and prevents triggering of ventricular pacing and hence the endless loop tachycardia. This discussion is on reed switch in pacemakers and implantable cardioverter defibrillators. Includes a mention on its replacement by Hall sensor in MRI conditional devices. Reed switch is used to activate the magnet mode in pacemaker or implantable cardioverter defibrillator. It is basically a collection of two strips of magnetic material enclosed in a glass capsule. Application of a magnetic field closes the reed switch by making contact between two metal strips. This changes the sensed voltage in a sensing amplifier, triggering a circuit controlling the magnet mode functional status. Reed switch can malfunction if the glass capsule is broken, remaining in same position regardless of the applied magnetic field. This situation is called sticky reed switch. The exact effect of magnet application on the various functions of pacemakers and ICDs will depend on the make of the device and the programmed parameters. But in general, the effect on pacemaker is that it stops sensing and functions in an asynchronous pacing mode. In case of ICDs, magnet application suspends all anti-tachycardia therapies without affecting the pacing mode. In most pacemakers, magnet application increases the pacing rate during the asynchronous pacing mode, but the actual rate and duration for which the higher rate is maintained will vary with each manufacturer or model. Some pacemakers can be programmed to initiate vario threshold checking on application of a magnet. Older pacemakers have a reed switch to initiate the magnet mode, while newer devices have a Hall sensor. Hall effect sensor is the modern replacement for the reed switches in pacemakers and ICDs. It is used in MRI conditional devices. Hall effect is a generation of electrical voltage across a conductor when the magnetic field is perpendicular to the direction of current flow in the conductor. In MRI conditional devices, the Hall effect can be used to lock out the device during the scan. Limitations of reed switch. Reed switch behavior will vary with the strength of the magnetic field and the orientation of the reed switch in the field. Reed switch is replaced by a solid state Hall effect sensor which perform better within the MR console by avoiding unpredictable reed switch behavior. Discussion on MRI conditional pacemakers including safety of 1.5 Tesla and 3 Tesla MRI scans. Conventionally, MRI is contraindicated in those with implanted pacemakers due to possibility of electromagnetic interference with pacemaker function. MRI conditional means that there are no known hazards when MRI is performed with pre-specified device programming, patient monitoring and imaging protocols. MRI conditional pacemakers were first introduced in 2008. These pacemakers have less ferromagnetic material and lead design changes reduce the chance for heating. Reduction of ferromagnetic material also reduces the potential for artifacts induced by the pacemaker system in the MR images. The winding pattern of the filament of inner lead coil and geometric design of the leads have been changed to avoid resonance at the MR signal frequency to avoid heating. It may be noted that MRI conditional devices should be connected to MRI conditional leads only. Otherwise, the system will not be MRI conditional. Reed switch is replaced by a solid state Hall effect sensor which perform better within the MR console by avoiding unpredictable reed switch behavior. Reed switch behavior will vary with the strength of the magnetic field and the orientation of the reed switch in the field. Easily programmable MRI mode is available in these devices. This will prevent inappropriate pacemaker inhibition and competing rhythms. These devices have special circuitry to prevent damage to internal power supply when exposed to MRI signals. ASTM standard F2503 for making medical devices and other items for safety in the magnetic resonance environment. From the left to right, the symbols for MR safe, MR unsafe, and MR conditionally safe. Wilkoff and colleagues in a prospective randomized controlled worldwide clinical trial evaluated the safety and effectiveness of MRI conditional pacemakers in 464 patients. Patients were randomized to undergo MRI scan between 9 to 12 weeks after implantation of specially designed dual-chamber pacemaker and leads. MRI was done at 1.5 Tesla and patients were monitored for arrhythmias, symptoms and pacemaker function. Brain and lumbar MRI sequences were obtained. No complications related to MRI occurred during or after the scan. Pro-MRI Phase B study was a multi-center prospective non-randomized study to evaluate the clinical safety of the Biotronik Pro-MRI pacemaker system in patients undergoing thoracic spine and cardiac MRI. The study enrolled 245 patients with stable baseline pacing. 216 patients completed the MRI scan and 1 month follow-up. One adverse event possibly related to the implanted system and MRI procedure occurred. The serious adverse device effect-free rate was 99.6%. Real-world data of 4-year prospective follow-up in 2,629 patients with MRI conditional pacemaker system has been published by Williamson and Associates. 526 patients underwent 872 clinically indicated MRI scans, including 58 thoracic scans. No MRI-related complications occurred during or after MRI. 6 MRI-related observations were reported, which included atrial fibrillation, increase in pacing capture threshold, and chest symptoms. 171 patients underwent 2 or more scans with no cumulative increase in pacing capture threshold. MRI using 3 Tesla devices has been reported by Ning and colleagues. 20 patients with MRI conditional pacemakers underwent 23 MRI scans of different regions of the body, including brain, lumbar spine, cervical spine, and heart. Standardized protocol was developed by cardiologists, pacemaker engineers, and radiologists. No adverse events were detected and image quality was grade 1 in 16 patients. Artifacts of pulse generators and leads in cardiac MRI scan caused grade 2 quality in 4 patients without any impact on diagnostic value. Mitsui and Associates were the first to describe pacemaker syndrome in 1969 as a symptom complex associated with right ventricular pacing. In general, pacemaker syndrome is due to a loss of AV synchrony and it is relieved by AV sequential pacing. But of late, the role of VV synchrony has also been highlighted so that efforts to minimize right ventricular pacing has been promoted. Patients with pacemaker syndrome may present with exertional dyspnea, hypotension, near syncope, or even syncope. Syncope occurs in the setting of a drop of systolic blood pressure more than 20 millimeters of mercury at the onset of ventricular pacing. Easy fatigability, sensation of fullness and pulsation in the head and neck are also features of the pacemaker syndrome. When an intact VA conduction is present, the pacemaker syndrome may be more severe due to the reverse atrial kick associated with every cardiac cycle. Venous pressure elevation as a result of atrial contraction against a closed AV valve causes reflex peripheral vasodilatation and hypotension by stimulating the vagal efferents. The reported incidence of pacemaker syndrome varies widely. In those trials in which a dual chamber pacemaker was implanted and programmed to single chamber mode for the study purpose, the changeover rates to dual chamber mode for suspected pacemaker syndrome was high. But in those trials in which a surgical revision was required for a mode change, the reported incidence was low. This may indicate a lower threshold for the diagnosis of pacemaker syndrome when surgical revision is not required. Discussion on implantable cardioverter defibrillator or ICD and subcutaneous ICD. Chest X-ray showing implantable cardioverter defibrillator. Device is seen in the left infraclavicular area. Two high voltage shocking coils are seen, one in the superior vena cava and another in the right ventricle. Two pacing electrodes are seen beyond the right ventricular high voltage coil. Multiple shock vectors can be programmed because the CAN and both high voltage coils can act as electrodes for discharging the high voltage shocks. One study has shown that configuring the right ventricular high voltage coil as anode gives a slightly lower defibrillation threshold and a potentially lower risk of inducing ventricular fibrillation when the shock is given for ventricular tachycardia. But with modern ICDs giving biphasic shocks, shock polarity is not of that significance. Yet, reverse shock polarity can be tried in those with high defibrillation thresholds. ICD is an implantable device which can treat both brady and tachyarrhythmias. If it detects significant bradycardia, it gives backup pacing signals. If a ventricular tachycardia is detected, it tries initially to suppress it by overdrive pacing. If it does not succeed, a direct current internal shock is delivered across the high voltage coils to terminate the arrhythmia. If a very fast ventricular tachycardia which is life-threatening or ventricular fibrillation is detected, the device straightaway gives a direct current shock to terminate the arrhythmia. This is a single chamber ICD. A dual chamber ICD will have an additional atrial lead which is useful in sensing atrial arrhythmias and avoiding unnecessary shocks. Inappropriate defibrillator shocks are one of the commonest problems faced by a patient implanted with an ICD. It produces psychological problems and affects quality of life in many ICD recipients. Inappropriate shocks are shocks delivered for rhythms other than ventricular fibrillation and sustained ventricular tachycardia. Most common cause of inappropriate shocks are supraventricular arrhythmias including supraventricular tachycardia, atrial fibrillation and sinus tachycardia. Myopotential oversensing and T-wave oversensing are other two important causes. Lead fracture and device malfunction can also cause inappropriate shocks. Electromagnetic interference from sources within and outside the hospital are also an important cause of inappropriate shocks. The actual cause in a given case can often be ascertained by ICD interrogation and retrieval of the rhythm prior to the shock which has culminated in the delivery of a shock. Myopotentials can be reproduced by various maneuvers like isometric hand grip, Valsalva maneuver and pushing against a wall with outstretched hands. Reprogramming the sensitivity and detection algorithms are often helpful in removing interferences due to myopotential oversensing and T-wave oversensing. Radiofrequency catheter ablation is an option in paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia. Lead fracture can be detected by image intensifier fluoroscopy and also indicated by an increase in lead impedance on interrogation. Fractured lead needs replacement to prevent inappropriate therapy due to noise detected at the fracture site as well as to deliver effective appropriate therapy when needed. Most of the electromagnetic interferences can be prevented by proper precautions in and out of the hospital. Discussion on a purely subcutaneous implantable cardioverter defibrillator. Subcutaneous ICD is the term used to designate ICDs which are purely subcutaneous without any intracardiac leads. It has been designed aiming to avoid the problems due to an intravascular lead for defibrillation, which is used in conventional ICD. An SICD uses a subcutaneous lead in the parasternal location, and the defibrillation current passes between the lead and the active can implanted in the infraaxillary region. As there is no intracardiac lead, it has only facility for short period backup bradycardia pacing. Hence, it cannot be used for those with indication for bradycardia pacing. Similarly, it cannot be used when combined cardiac resynchronization therapy is needed. SICD has another disadvantage in that it cannot be used for terminating ventricular tachycardias by overdrive pacing. Still, SICD can be considered in those with inherited channelopathies with propensity for life-threatening ventricular arrhythmias, congenital heart diseases with limitations on lead placement due to poor venous access, in immunocompromised hosts who are more likely to have intravascular infection, and in the young and active with higher chance of conventional ICD lead failure. The device is much bulkier than conventional transvenous ICDs because higher defibrillation energy is needed for SICD. Battery life may also be lesser for the same reason. One of the seminal studies on SICD was from Brady and Associates, reported in NEJM in 2010. Initially, they compared the thresholds for various configurations in 78 patients and later the best configuration in 49 patients to determine the subcutaneous defibrillation threshold in comparison with conventional transvenous ICD. Then they went on to a pilot study of long-term use in 6 patients and finally a trial involving 55 patients. The best configuration was found to be one with a parasternal electrode and an ICD can located in the left lateral thoracic region. It was effective in terminating ventricular fibrillation with a higher energy requirement compared to transvenous lead systems, mean of 36.6 joules versus 11.1 joule. Ventricular fibrillation was successfully detected in all the episodes induced. 2 cases of pocket infection and 4 lead revisions were required in the trial. During the follow-up period of 10 months, 12 episodes of spontaneous sustained ventricular tachyarrhythmias were detected and treated. 2015 ESC guidelines gave a Class 2A recommendation for SICD in patients with indication for ICD but not requiring pacing for bradycardia, anti-tachycardia pacing or CRT. AHA guidelines gave a Class 1 recommendation for patients with complex anatomy and venous access problems or in those at a high risk of infections in need of ICD therapy. Dual zone programming has been used in SICD to reduce inappropriate shocks. One shock zone and another with an arrhythmia discrimination algorithm at lower rates. Gold and Associates showed that adding an additional zone with arrhythmia discrimination reduces the inappropriate shocks from about 26.1% to 10.2% in a study involving 314 patients over 2 years. There was no difference in the freedom from appropriate shocks between the 2 groups, nor there was a difference in the mean time to appropriate therapy. It is noteworthy that there was no increased incidence of syncope with dual zone therapy. There was only 1 episode of arrhythmic syncope in the cohort. Usual programming has only a single zone for giving shocks based strictly on heart rate criteria without any rhythm discrimination. In the conditional shock zone, rhythm discrimination algorithm can classify rhythms which need a shock versus those that do not need shock when it is deemed to be supraventricular. Data on use of SICD in pediatrics and congenital heart disease has been published. It was an international multi-center retrospective analysis through the Pediatric and Congenital Electrophysiology Society. Complications at 30 days and 360 days, inappropriate shocks and appropriate shocks were evaluated. There were 115 patients in the study with median follow-up of 32 months. 55% were implanted for primary prevention. Complication rate at 30 days was 7.8% and 14.7% at 360 days. Inappropriate shocks were noted in 15.6% patients. Appropriate therapy was delivered in 11.2%. Acute first shock success was 92.5%. Chest X-ray in cardiac resynchronization therapy or CRT. Cardiac resynchronization therapy is biventricular pacing in which one lead paces the right ventricle endocardially, another the left ventricle epicardially through a coronary vein, and a third paces the right atrial appendage. It is a mode of treatment of left ventricular failure due to cardiac dyssynchrony, usually with left bundle branch block and wide QRS complex. Pulse generator is seen in the left infraclavicular region with three leads connected. One lead is seen free behind the pulse generator, possibly an earlier right ventricular lead which has been abandoned. It may be noted that an abandoned lead is of special interest in consideration of potential magnetic resonance imaging. Abandoned pacing leads show resonant heating with greater lead tip heating than leads connected to a pulse generator. The lead with J-shaped tip has its tip located in the right atrial appendage for atrial pacing. Right ventricle shows two bipolar leads side by side near the left hemidiaphragm, one being an old abandoned right ventricular lead and another an active right ventricular lead. The left ventricular lead going through the coronary sinus to settle in coronary vein with two electrodes at higher interelectrode distance is better seen in this picture. The atrial electrode tip shows a screw, suggesting that it is a screw-in lead than a tined lead. Ventricular lead tips are suggestive of tined leads with no screw visible. Anticoagulation for prevention of stroke is a well-established modality of treatment in atrial fibrillation, but a significant number of them have bleeding complications. Hence, the option of left atrial appendage closure with multiple types of devices have been developed. Left atrial appendage with its sluggish flow is the most common location for thrombus formation in atrial fibrillation. Following devices have been used with varying success. 1. Watchman. 2. Amblatzer cardiac plug or amulet. 3. Lariat suture ligation. 4. AtriClip. Protect AF studying Watchman device randomized patients with non-valvular AF if they had at least one of stroke or transient ischemic attack, congestive heart failure, diabetes, hypertension, or age 75 years or more. This was a multi-center non-inferiority trial. Warfarin was eventually discontinued in the intervention group while it was continued with target INR 2 to 3 in the control group. Initial results showed non-inferiority with higher primary safety events in the intervention group. 2.3-year follow-up data was reported later was also similar. Warfarin was continued for about 45 days after device implantation, followed by clopidogrel for 4.5 months and lifelong aspirin. Amblatzer cardiac plug bar amulet real-world registry included 1,088 patients. Of these patients with non-valvular AF, 82.8% had an absolute or relative contraindication to long-term anticoagulation, while 72.4% had a previous major bleeding episode. Device could be successfully implanted in 99% of cases. Lariat suture ligation requires both endocardial transeptal and epicardial access. Pilari Setti and associates have shown lower leaks at 1 year with Lariat compared to Watchman, with no difference in the rates of cerebrovascular accidents. As the Lariat electrically isolates the left atrial appendage, it may also reduce the AF burden. AtriClip is an epicardial surgical closure device which can be used in both open and minimally invasive approaches. It has been shown to reduce the risk of stroke in those undergoing cardiac surgery when the device was deployed epicardially during open heart surgery.